Hey there, Dr. G back on the scene. Well, how about that weather? Snowstorms and now spring rains. That's a lot of water. Speaking of water, yes, Aquaforce. You think Nova Grapplers need stand triggers? Well, these guys practically require it. Well, for some builds anyway. The fact that their rear guards need multiple attacks in order for the vanguards to get their skills makes them a little clunky to use. But in my opinion, that just makes them a tactical type of deck. And in terms of card games, that actually makes them quite unique. As you can see here, this is the Maelstrom build, as I interpret it. It focuses on multiple attacks by the rear guards, obviously, in order to set off Maelstrom's skill and put the opponent in a pinch. You see this? Stands for days. That's right, this is a standtastic deck running 12 stands. Now, I've heard some people run 1 or 2 crits into the deck just for the surprise factor, but in my opinion, it undermines the entire strategy of a Maelstrom deck. Think about it. Maelstrom will be the one to attack last. So, if you attack with Maelstrom and the opponent does not want Maelstrom's skill to activate, they'll block it. They'll always block it. And if you get a crit from Maelstrom's drive check, it'll be a waste. What you want instead is a stand trigger. So stand one of your already rested rearguard units to keep the ball rolling. And then we also have your usual 4 heals, enough said about that, and 4 draws to keep the old hand healthy. And then for starter, we have Eric. Eric's good not only to search out for Maelstrom or Revvon, either one, most preferably Maelstrom, but also it can search out for rearguard attackers. You're gonna need that Diamantes to keep the attack rolling in, and even Maelstroms or Revvons in the rearguard position to attack your opponent. As for grade 1s, let's start off with 4 perfect guards. Now said. Then we have the 4 Mercenary Brave Shooters. Mercenary Brave Shooters are great as a booster and decent as an attacker. You should only really use them in conjunction with any of the Storm Riders. Then we have Battle Siren Dorothea 2. It turns Maelstrom into a beastly 26 key attacker on limit break. Enough said. Then you have 2 Light Signals Penguin Soldiers, your typical Soul Blast 1 draw 1 card, keeps the whole hand healthy. And then we have 2 Storm Rider Eugens. Now I know some people out there are using cards that they would consider better than Eugen, but for me there's a very good reason to be using Eugen, and that is to keep your opponent at 3 damage. More on that later. And as for grade 2s, we have 4 Twin Strike Brave Shooters. The Twin Strike Brave Shooter is a great switching partner for any of the Storm Rider cards. And speaking of Storm Rider cards, you have 3 Storm Rider Basils. Storm Riders are practically essential in getting Maelstrom to its limit break ability, so having these in the deck is really, really important. And finally, both running 2s, we have 2 cards that are your 11 key attackers, Coral Assault and Titan of the Beam Rifle. And lastly, we have the grade 3s. And to start off, we have Maelstrom. The threat of Maelstrom retiring one of your opponent's units and drawing a card with just 1 measly counterblast is a great pressure system, but it needs to be the 4th attacker. And for that, we have Storm Rider Diamantes at 2. Now, I only run Diamantes at 2 and no more than that because I don't want to have to accidentally write it over as my Vanguard if I don't have Maelstrom. I would rather have anything else than Diamantes, and I think 2 is the best number to keep it that way. Speaking of which, we have last card Revvon, which is your alternate main Vanguard. The thing with Revvon is it doesn't take away from the overall strategy of the deck. It practically runs the same way as Maelstrom in that it attacks last in order to get its limit break skill. So it takes full advantage of all the stand triggers that the deck runs. Cards to consider. Well, there are some things to keep in mind. One thing to consider is more stand triggers! Woo! Stands for days! And with that, we removed the draw triggers for the stand triggers for maximum standing power. Now, if you're not comfortable with the Eugenes or the Penguin Soldiers or even the Dorotheas, you can replace the 3 of these with copies of Tier Knight Theo, depending on how many you choose to use or how many you want to get rid of. Theos are great because it can make your 8Ks like Basil, Coral, Titan into 16Ks to be able to hit those 11K vanguards or rear guards easily. And that, or even your 11Ks into 19s to hit those 19K rear guards. Now, another thing to consider is maybe another copy of Basil here in place of either your Coral Assaults, a Titan of the Beam Rifle, or Twin Strike Brave Shooters. Reason for that is sometimes it's really frustrating if you can't get any Storm Riders to help you activate Maelstrom skill. So with 4 Basils, you could have 8 Storm Riders to really give you better chances. Something minor would probably be more copies of either Coral Assault in place of Titan of the Beam Rifle, or more copies of Titan of the Beam Rifle over Coral Assault. The reason you do that would probably be for prices. Coral Assault is a little bit more rare compared to Titan of the Beam Rifle, so if you're a little strapped for cash, you could just choose to use Titan of the Beam Rifle over Coral Assault. Another thing you could use if you're not feeling Coral Assault or Titan of the Beam Rifle is just use your old vanilla 10K rear guards, Tier Knight Lazarus, over Coral Assault or Titan the Beam Rifle. Or maybe even just the 2, if you still want your 11Ks, replace one of these 2 for 2 copies of Tier Knight Lazarus. These 10Ks are really reliable, so it's great to have. Another card to consider is the Break Ride, Transcore, over last card Revvon. Now, with the Break Ride, if you manage to put him onto the field, you manage to have him as your Vanguard first, then you ride it over with Maelstrom, your Maelstrom will be a really, really big threat. Plus 10K, extra critical if they don't discard from their hand. There's a really good chance that your Maelstrom will hit if you keep him at 3 damage, that is. And now for the overall strategy of this deck. In order to use this deck, I have established a sort of attack pattern, and that attack pattern depends on how much damage the opponent has. Why is that important? Well, it's because of limit breaks. If they're at 3 damage, they would have to choose to let Maelstrom hit them in order to get to that 4th damage, and risk having Maelstrom activate its skill, pop one of their guys, and they get an extra draw. Or they could just block its attack. Right? Right. Alright. So let's get to this. First off, of course, you got your Storm Rider. Storm Rider's skill is he has to attack the opponent's Vanguard, right? Let's start off with Basil here. Basil, when he attacks, he only reaches up to 10. So with an 11k Vanguard, that won't even register. So after that, Brave Shooter steps up. And now, when it comes to this part, what would you attack? Would you attack the Vanguard? No, not yet. While at 3 damage, you gotta wait. So instead, you target their rear guards. Now, you attack their rear guards, maybe they'll block it, maybe they'll let it die. Doesn't matter. Whatever they do, they'll be losing cards. That's attack 2. Then we get into attack 3. Your third attack, you go after the Vanguard. Not yet. No, you go after the rear guard first and foremost. Right there or there. And of course, they'll be losing cards either way. After that, since they're still at 3 damage, Maelstrom can go in for the attack. Attack the Vanguard. Will they take it? Maybe, maybe not. Doesn't really matter. And then, when the triggers come in, what do you know? It's a stand trigger. Stand one of your units, preferably the one that doesn't require some certain skills, have it to be able to reach any of the other rear guards, like Twin Strike Brave Shooter here. It won't even reach up to 12 if it's if anything else, if there's more than 2 at rest. So let's go with your third attacker, which is more than likely one of your 11k attackers. Stand him up. Would you attack the Vanguard? Probably not. You'll probably still attack the rear guard. Well, depending on the situation. You'll attack the Vanguard if there's no rear guards on the field. Sure, why not? As long as you keep the pressure on. Now, here's one other thing I'm gonna go over, and it has to do with the Storm Riders. Now, as you know from my deck list, I use the 3 different types of Storm Riders: Basil, Eugene, and Diamantes. Now, for my strategy, I would actually prefer to use Basil or Eugene first over Diamantes, and that's all because I want to keep them at 3 damage first. That way, I can have my Maelstrom attack their 11k Vanguard and hopefully get a successful hit, or maybe they'll just block it with lots of shields or their perfect cards. With either one of these 2 cards, Eugene or Basil, they'll immediately miss because they're not big enough to hit an 11k Vanguard. And then later on, when it's time to put the pressure onto the Vanguard, you can replace them with the Mantis here, which has the ability to hit 11k Vanguards, right? Also, if you kind of consider it, like if you have to use Diamantes, that's also fine. Like if you attack with their Vanguard with Diamantes, will they take it? Probably not. They'll probably block, or they'll take it. They'll just take it because they'll know they'll be blocking Maelstrom anyway, or they'll be hoping for a trigger in order to put it on their Vanguard. So that means you gotta target their rear guards. Or maybe they'll put it on their rear guards. You can attack the other rear guard, or even continue attacking their Vanguard, to put the pressure on. After that, they have to deal with the monster known as Maelstrom. So that's one of the things you got to consider with how to use your Storm Riders, Overall, Maelstrom is a very interesting deck. With the ability to pressure your opponent into making a mistake, it is a very tactical deck. And in my opinion, should only be reserved for people who can make use of that very tactic. As for me though, it's not really my kind of thing. I'm more of a power deck kind of guy. Death and destruction everywhere. This is Dr. G signing out.